Hi, friends. Are you ready? Do you want to go ahead and start, Rosemary? Okay, sounds great. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Jenna Kirkpatrick, and I am the manager of outreach and engagement for Evermore. Evermore is America's voice in advancing social change for all bereaved people. In celebration of our 10-year anniversary this year of serving our communities by advocating for meaningful policy change, advancing bereavement science, and cultivating innovative bereavement programming nationwide, we are happy to announce Evermore Voices, a poetry anthology that will honor our collective voices. We will be accepting submissions in the late summer for publication in 2025. So please stay tuned for more information about that. And we all look forward to reading your beautiful work. I'm also a poet and a bereaved mom, and I believe wholeheartedly in the therapeutic act of writing. Each morning, I revel in Rosemary's poetry, and one of my favorites I just read is called Love Like Water, and her lines read, "We could say the pain was a block so great it could not be moved. We could say love did not try to move it. Love simply surrounded the mass and dissolved it. And there was no part of the pain that was not touched by love. The pain was no less, it's true, but mixed with love, dispersed, the pain became something new, something vital that encouraged a different kind of life, a substance that supported buoyancy, a medium to carry me. My wish this evening is that this medium, writing, carries you in community and understanding, and that together we hold this space. I would love to take a few seconds for some deep breaths and silence to acknowledge all of our precious energy. All right, friends, thank you. Please join me in offering a warm welcome to our gracious friend and our Evermore Poet Laureate, the amazing Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer.
Hey, thank you, Jenna. Thank you. And I also want to thank Keisha, who is helping us tonight with our tech. And I want to thank every one of you for showing up. Thank you. Jenna was so right, I think, in saying that this is a chance to be supported, to find comfort, to find a way to show up through writing. But also when we do it in this way, it's not just the writing, but also the listening and the companionship, the doing it together. A very different energy than sitting alone in a room is to be here together and explore what it is to be alive and to love and to lose. And I wanted to lose. Well, yes, I'll say it that way. I wanted to start with a little phrase of a poem from Mary Oliver that touches on it just a little bit. Oh, to love what is lovely and will not last. Oh, to love what is lovely and will not last. What a task it is for anything or anyone, yet it is ours to love what will not last. Oh, to love what is lovely and will not last. What a task it is for anything or anyone, yet it is ours. And I'm grateful, Jenna, that you brought up love in that little introduction and the little poem, Love Like Water, and this sense of what are we doing here together, and what is why would we show up? I know I know why you've shown up. I know that because like me, like Jenna, like everyone here, that you are meeting a grief. And I want to offer right now, please put in the chat bar the name of a person or what it is that you are grieving, knowing that our griefs can sometimes be quite complex. It could be grief for our planet. It could be grief for a beloved. But please do, just in the chat bar, invoke the name of what it is that you are meeting with sorrow, meeting with love, to love what is lovely and will not last. And I have a candle here that I'm going to light, and imagine that in this moment, all of these names that are in the chat bar, just if you have a candle, perhaps light one also, or imagine offering this light to each other and to our beloveds. Oh, friends, I'm looking at all the names moving through, just thinking of all that love. Thank you for naming our beloveds. When my son Finn died almost 3 years ago now, he chose to take his own life in August of 2021. And my beloved friend Wendy said to me that night, that very night, he has given you his love light to carry. And so in part, that is what we're doing together tonight, is we are carrying the love lights of our beloveds. And in writing, I've noticed that there are really two ways that we can do this, that there are two kinds of grief poems, I suppose we could say. One is that explores our relationship with our beloved. And how in this way helps that relationship continue to grow, continue to teach us. It still nourishes that relationship. And the other is to consider what is our relationship to grief itself, which is a profound relationship. So tonight we'll be reading two poems, one that explores the loss of a beloved and a relationship there, and the other that explores our relationship to grief. And for just kind of the layout of how this whole night is going to go, we'll just do a little bit of this introduction. We'll be reading poems together. There's two poems, and we'll have them up on the screen so that you're going to be able to read them. Later, they will be sent to you along with the link to this program. So you will have a copy of them show up in your inbox in a day or two. We'll read poems. We'll talk about them a little bit. I'll offer some writing ideas. You will go off and do some writing. We'll come back. We'll talk about process. We'll read another poem. We'll talk about it. You'll go off and do some writing and come back. Then we'll have an opportunity for people to share, which is to say, both share with your voice and share with your ears, and really show up for each other and companion each other. And then we'll have some time at the end to talk a little bit more about the process and what happens when we show up and meet our grief together. And a few things I'll say then about writing. I'm aware that some of you write a lot, and I'm aware that some of you write none. And every level, no matter what you do tonight, I want to promise you, you can only do it right. There is the only thing whatever you do, it will be right. Even if you don't write a word, but you sit and show up, then that's the right thing to do. If you write something and you think it's no good, let's just promise each other right now that not one of us will write anything that is any good. That's really not the point tonight. But there is an invitation to show up and meet something true, to notice how when we sit down sometimes and write, it allows us to multiple things. My own experience is that it allows me to see how every moment is a new moment, and how whatever grief is in this moment isn't the same as what it was before. And over time, that really helps me know that it changes and changes and changes and changes. And when grief feels absolutely intolerable, I have somewhat of a history that shows me it isn't always this way. Another thing that writing can do for us is to just help us be very curious. What's true? What's true right now? It has nothing to do with writing anything good, right? But just to wonder what is true right now. And to question what is true. Is that really true? And to know that sometimes what's true can be really opposite. And I'm guessing you know this too in your body, what it's like in grief, how there can be really strong conflicting things happening at the same time. There can be incredible anger and incredible softness. There can be incredible sorrow and astonishing joy. And how at the same time different things are true, which can poems are a really beautiful way to meet these opposites and experience them at the same time and know that they can both be equally true and that that's okay. And by the way, if the word poetry in any way offends you or scares you, then for heaven's sakes, don't call it a poem, just call it writing. And if that word scares, then just don't call it anything at all and notice what happens when we show up. So I want to start with just this very small idea that we can always show up with a pen in our hands as a way of wonderment. And with this very simple line, today grief is, and then fill in the blank. And I'm going to ask all of us to do this right now. And if you would, in the chat bar, just fill in that blank. Today grief is, and it might be an adjective. Today grief is terrifying. Today grief is easy. It could be a noun. Today grief is an eraser. Today grief is a cliff that I'm falling off of. So I'm going to just read some of the things that you write, and we'll create a spontaneous group poem. I won't read everyone's, but we'll see what shows up. Today grief is first love. Today grief is chrysanthemums. Today grief is hard and long. It is sadness and more present than usual. Today grief is here, a companion. It's familiar, it's holy. Today grief is deep and precious. It's loneliness. Grief is as tired as I am. It's transformation, it's gentle, it's on the back burner. Today grief is hard to grasp. It's hard, it's a deep ocean, it's elusive, it's softer than it was yesterday. Today grief is sorrow and peonies. It's manageable. It's an empty ache in my chest. Today grief is diarrhea. It's watching my son in unrelenting pain. It's in my cells. Today grief is loving myself. It's free falling, far away, an old scarf, it's whole. Today grief is lighter because it's shared. It's ancient, it's welcome. It's not a matter of concern. It's pressure in my chest. It's my kind partner. It's gaining momentum. It's giving up something I love. It's missing my bly. It's compounded by joy. It's distant and hiding, but still here, a curious remembering. Today, grief is my best teacher. Oh my goodness, friends. There's so many more. I wish I could read them all. And I know that we'll be able to send you the chat so that you will be able to see them all if you want to in the future. But I want you to notice how profound that is, in part because we see all the many ways grief shows up, that it is so complex, that it's so varied, that it can be so different for different people. It can be so different for a single person from moment to moment. And so just honoring how different it is for each person and in each moment. Also, I want to point out that was just a list. So if you wanted to, if at any point you wanted to do your own writing, notice that at any point you could just write that today grief is, and see what shows up. And just follow a thread. Maybe it shows up as a list, or maybe it just shows up as one thing that you can explore for a long time. But that particular prompt has helped me more than anything else, I think, showing up for grief with writing. So at this point, we're going to start by looking at a poem. It's by a beloved friend of mine, James Cruz, who I know that some of you are very familiar with. And if you would go ahead and put that up on the screen. And I'm going to need two readers. And what I would like is for two people to, and I can't see if you're raising your hand. So I'm going to need you, if you'd like to read, I'll need two people to volunteer, please. And we'll hear the poem in two voices. And if you could use the reactions bar to raise your hand, that would help me. And I'd love it. Thank you. We have Luz and Stacy, the two of you. I appreciate that you offered to read it. If you would, please just read the whole poem all the way through. First, Luz. And as Luz is reading, if you would, on the screen, friends, if you want, go ahead and underline with your finger any word or phrase or image that stands out to you about this poem. The second time, when Stacy is reading the poem, I'm going to invite you to just close your eyes and listen to the poem and not reach for it at all. Just let the poem reach for you, and then we'll have a little conversation about it. So Luz, if you would go ahead and unmute, and then Stacy, right after she's done, if you would jump on in. Thank you.
Mother and Son by James Cruz. Though you're gone now, my body still remembers being held by you that evening, wearing my blue fleece pajamas with a white owl on the front, and you saying, "Who, who," over and over, both of us laughing as you explained. That's the song owls make when they need to find each other in the dark before sleep. A way of saying, I can't see you, but I know you must be there.
You're
Thank
gone
you.
now. My body still remembers being held by you that evening, wearing my blue fleece pajamas with a white owl on the front, and you saying, who, over and over. Both of us laughing as you explained, that's the song owls make when they need to find each other in the dark before sleep. A way of saying, I can't see you, but I know you must be there.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you, Luz and Stacy. Okay. If we could keep the poem up, or maybe better, Keisha, can you paste it into the chat bar so everyone can read the poem in the chat bar? And thank you. Wow, it's so great to have help. Thank you, Keisha. Thank you, Jenna. So I'm going to invite you now just to notice what stands out about this poem for you. What do you feel as you read it? What does it bring up for you? What do you notice about yourself as you're reading it? What do you notice about the poem itself? Is there a word or phrase or image that stands out? Once again, it would be great if you would um, use since I won't be able to see you, raise your hand. If you would, please use the reactions to make your hand go up. And I'd love to just talk a little bit about what you notice about this poem and what it brings up for you. Thank you, Lynette.
I noticed that it's one long sentence.
Yeah. Do you want to say something more about that? What effect does that have for you?
Oh, it makes you read it faster, like it's one long thought. The though you're gone now, although it begins the poem, is not the point of the poem. The point is the remembering. Yeah, the beautiful memory.
Yeah.
And I love the line to find each other in the dark.
Yeah, me too. You know, I think this is such a beautiful point about noticing that it's just a sentence. Doesn't that help a little bit thinking about, I don't know if I could write a poem, but could you write one sentence? And then just noticing how often I think sometimes grief can feel like it comes to us in this just cohesive, like, and it feels like it's not going to end, like it's got comma after comma after comma, but it doesn't stop, but the sentence just keeps going on. Luz, and then Patricia, or Patricia, I'm not sure how to say, but Luz.
I loved that the memory has a very present tense.
Yeah.
So I remember, and there you are. It's I don't know if there's a name for that, but it is very much a living, active memory rather than nostalgia, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, very nice. And I think that comes through really strong in that second line, right? My body still remembers. It's very present. What a gorgeous observation. Thanks, Luz. Patricia, and please correct me if I say your name wrong.
Hi, yes, you said it correctly. What struck me was the line, my body still remembers. And it's because I feel that when we lose someone or something, there's almost like a freezing of time, something that just solidifies and is in a part of our heart, our body, that although we go on physically and we talk and we go about our day, there's this other part, and almost as though we're living parallel states. Like there's this tragedy, this loss, this grief, that moment that just never disappears. And then our lives that kind of go along with that. It's like time is frozen. And the other thing was the line, I can't see you, but I know you must still be there. You must be there. And I think what's so powerful and moving about that is that I have always the saying, I even have a sign here that I put up, and it says, love is everything. And because of the long, strong connections of love that we have to those that we lose, they're never really gone because there's always that memory and connection. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Patricia, for pointing out both those things about that, how that ongoing connection, and also about these almost like living in two lives. The life that's still in this memory, still remembers, and the life that somehow goes to the grocery store and interacts with other people. Yeah, thank you. Charlotte, and then Jamie.
Wow, thank you so much for this poem and this opportunity. One of the lines that stood out for me is the memory of the laughing and this child explaining that that's how owls find each other in the dark before sleep. And there's something so symbolic about all those images for me around grief, around wanting to find my loved one somewhere in the dark, you know? Yeah.
And isn't it interesting? I love that you point out that there's laughter in this poem. It's a poem that touches on the greatest sorrow, and it brings in this sweet, this laughter that's possible then too. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Charlotte. Jamie, and then Lenny.
Hi, Rosemary and everyone. I was just really struck by the owls. And I just find, the person that has really drawn me here, you can actually hear a bird in the background, loves birds. And I just find that animals, especially birds for me, have just been such teachers. And I just found so much comfort and so much just like just comfort in the sense of like, oh, there's still like a remembering, like even though this person isn't here, there's so much symbolism, and there's just ways that they're still here, even if we can't see them. And so that was just what really just stood out to me. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks for bringing that in, and the way it is, these small passions, right? Or not even small, these passions, this is what the bird says. This is, your connection with your beloved through the birds, James's connection with his mother, and that all of us have with our beloveds, these moments of connection, this shared passion or this shared interest, or maybe it's their interest, and because they love it, you do too now. And bringing that all together. Beautiful. Thank you. Lenny, and then Elizabeth, and then I think it'll be time to look at some writing. Oh, Lenny, you're on mute still, friend.
Okay, here I am. Thank you, everybody. I was intrigued by the one sentence, and it felt to me like it was a long sentence. And I don't mean sentence in a bad way, I mean in a good way. That there was connection over time. There was love over time. And also, I think about the body remembers. We could look at it as trauma, or and we could look at it as the opposite of trauma, which is the joy that she talks about, the memories. And so it's all of it. Grief is all of it. So that's what I want to say. Thank you.
That's really nicely said, Lenny, that the all of it is there. It's the grief and the joy and experiencing it at the same time, which is what grief asks of us, really, is to experience again that love and the inevitable pain that comes from losing someone we deeply love. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Lenny. Elizabeth, and then I'll offer some ideas for writing.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, some beautiful things people have said about this poem. And the first thing that I'd like to say is that I was engaged right away with the description of this person wearing blue fleece pajamas with a white owl on the front. And yeah, that just it pulled me in, and I wanted to know more. And then saying who over and over, that struck me. That was the first thing that struck me. And then owls or something. I mean, most of you probably know they're portenders of things to come, and used in a lot of indigenous cultures for has different meanings. And it reminded me of when one of my grandmothers died. Before she died, she was 103 and had her mind and body up to the very end. We always we were trying to figure out whichever one of us went over to the, crossed over before the other one, that we'd have some sort of signal. Well, she died and we didn't have a signal. And 6 months after she died, I had this overcoming, I was overcome with grief, and I lay down on the grass and Mother Earth, and I was just grieving her. And I was at this lake where we had a cabin, and all of a sudden from the other side of the bay was this whoo. That caught me in this poem because I knew she'd made it to the other side. So it just has special meaning for me. This poem, it reminded me of that.
I love that you bring this up. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. And that when we come to a poem, half of a poem is the poem, but half of the poem is the person who's meeting it. And we bring the full body of our experiences to the poem. And so I love that you share, you have this personal connection with it also. I also wanted to share from the chat bar, thank you so much, Amrita, for pointing out grief is not always about someone who's gone. There are so many ways we grieve people who, of course, many ways to engage in grief besides people who have died. So I really appreciate you bringing that in. Thank you for that. So I'm going to go ahead and ask if you would please, Jenna, put in the screen now, and then we'll have it in the chat bar also, as well as the poem again. Some ideas for writing. And if you've been in a class with me before, you know that I'm giving you a couple of ideas, but of course, if they don't work for you, for heaven's sakes, do something else that does. So there are two ideas about what to write. I already told you, though, you don't actually have to write anything. Even if you sit and just think about this or think about your beloved, then you're doing it right. So much of writing is not writing. So much of writing is just showing up. So here are two ideas. What does your body remember about your loved one? Think of a time when you were close, perhaps touching, perhaps not, and describe that interaction. Where in your body do you long to feel them and remember them right now? And if you need a starting line, maybe take this one from James, my body still remembers. Or another idea, write a letter to your loved one. Perhaps just share details from your day to day, perhaps ask questions, knowing you likely won't receive answers. And I'll just say this too about the writing practice. Oh, friends, writing won't fix anything and it won't give us answers. Wouldn't that be nice? I'm certainly not going to promise that, nor do I believe it. I really think that writing is a way for us to show up and feel into what is most true, but it's not going to fix things or bring answers. So just so we're all feeling realistic about what might really happen. We're going to have 15 minutes for you to do some writing, and actually, let's say, yeah, 15 minutes. We'll be back together then at 48 after the hour. And whatever you do, you can only do it right. If you would go ahead and again put the poem in the chat bar too, Keisha, and once again, we'll be back at 48 after the hour. 2 more minutes. Welcome back. Welcome back. We have some time now to talk about process, which is to say what happened, what didn't happen, what did you notice? What did you notice about yourself? What did you notice about your body? What did you notice about what came up? Knowing that sometimes it just flushes out. Sometimes we're stuck. Knowing that stuck is 1,000% as much a part of the process as writing. Anyone willing to share about what happened or didn't happen while you were writing? Not sharing what you actually wrote. That will happen later or not. That'll be a choice. But sharing about your process. Igmara, and please let me know if I say your name correctly.
You did. I'm pleasantly surprised. No one ever does. I was actually really shocked that of what came up and of who came up. I started all this without really connecting with any one particular grief. I'm the one who wrote in the chat that I'm a hospice and hospital chaplain. So I've been dealing with death and dying for 16 years professionally, and then a lot of in my own personal life since childhood. So I was just really shocked and pleasantly surprised at who and what came up for me, and just the and the complexity of the emotions. So I appreciated this opportunity. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Imara. And I think too, you're so right. The complexity, I think, is surprising. It always surprises me, you know, how many poems can be written too about the same grief. You know, how just to prove the complexity, right? Just that it's certainly not all going to come out in one poem, but also just the surprise of, oh, that's what's here. And that is, I think, one of the great gifts of writing, is to be like, oh, this? Oh, okay. Beautiful that you followed it too, that you were able to say, okay, here I am. As my friend would say, obey the emerging form. Sophie, and then Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you. So I haven't written very much poetry, but when I have, it's either been in nature, feeling very kind of inspired by nature or alone. So it was kind of interesting, to have more of like a time pressure. And there was a sensation, like a grief sensation that's been with me that I've been exploring that I felt like I really wanted to write about. And so for a little while, I felt like, oh, I don't understand how this is going to fit into the prompt exactly, because it's my body. Anyway, I sat with the sensations and just kind of like a loving awareness of the sensations for a while. And I wrote a poem. So it was really nice.
I love the sound of surprise in your voice. I wrote a poem.
No, I was like, if I sit here, this is beautiful too. If I just sit here for the whole 15 minutes with it. But then I was able to write something.
Yeah. I also want to just honor, Sophia, what you said. I sat with the sensations, right? Just to notice what shows up in the body. Just as you say, that would have been enough. That would have been just fine. But just that so often we won't, right? So often we'll push it away. And I think that when we do sit down to write, in a way, it is a way to say, okay, grief, I'm here, I'm ready, I'll show up right now. It is saying, I'll face you, I'll meet you. And so often we don't, we go off and we make food, or we pay the bills, or we do our job, or we take care of someone else, or whatever it is. So I love just that. I sat with my sensations. Thank you for saying it just like that, Sophie. Elizabeth, and then Barbara.
So I think this is what you were just saying partly, is that I was surprised by how being in the body and remembering what the body remembers is so present. It's gone. It's many years ago, but it's still, when I think about what that feeling was, it's right here and right now. And the absence of that body that was in my life is so present. And it's not sad, it's just present. And the love that was there is still alive.
Yeah. And the love that was there is still alive. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you. And just really, even many years later, how it can still be so present in the body. I do think this is why the invitation to bring our body into our writing is so profound, because the body remembers. It's the repository for our stories. Thank you so much. Barbara, you're on mute, sweet friend.
How's that? Is that better? Okay. I just wanted to thank you for giving us all this opportunity. I started out, which I often do when I sit down to write or to draw or to create, with blank, as if, wait, there's nothing there at all. Nothing. And then I went back to My Body Still Remembers, which you left us with. And that just opened up. Whole cascade of sadness and grief, and this is long, long ago, and joy. It became a tapestry. I didn't write about that, but I was just amazed by, when I say my body still remembers, it just took me, I just flew away with it. I don't know how to describe it. It was remarkable. So I wrote a poem. But that's not the point.
And that's not thank you. It's not the point. Although your poem is part of it, right? Because you said that write it. But the poem is just the byproduct. It's the byproduct of the real practice, which is this showing up. And thank you, Barbara, for pointing out, I show up blank. Great. how awesome is that too? Like, how much do people pay to go blank? You know, we go to meditation retreats or whatever, right? Like, you just showing up blank is not a problem. It's just what it is until something else happens. And I love how you say what I did. I went to the poem and I found another line. Here's that line. My body still remembers. Oh, here. And then the portal opens and then something else happens. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Dina and then Circe. Again, if I say your names wrong, please help me.
You got it right. And thank you also for inviting us to write, even if we're scared of writing, because I was thinking, I know from a process point of view, it was interesting as I came in here, both with like this agenda of the grief I wanted to address, which is a more recent grief, and then when you had this a sit, I was like, and now I have to write, and I have to write that grief, and I was blocked because I was doing that to myself. And then I just stopped and said, just go into my body and feel my body. And it was amazing because just staying in my body, grief actually came out, but it was it was from when I was a little girl and my mother died. So it was really way, that was not what I had intended to go into. And I think what was beautiful for me in the writing was as I was writing, I don't know that it's coherent at all what I wrote, but as I was writing, it's like one grief and the memory in my body linked to other griefs. It was like, as by staying in the body, I could see like it's all connected. So thank you. That was very powerful for me. I don't know if the writing is that great, but it was a very powerful experience.
Yeah, great, Schmate. You know, really, I mean it. Nobody write anything any good, but if you can touch that truth, right? And if you can, and also, Dina, what I love so much about you said is that you let yourself, you came with an agenda, and
Right.
then it went out the window, and you let it. Although it sounds like in a way, then it had a way to come back in a really authentic way through writing about grief, a different grief, but allowing that grief to touch all griefs. You know, how beautiful that surrender, right? That, and to trust what showed up and follow it. I thank you for sharing that. Circe, oh, there we go. Saoirse, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, okay, so today is all right, tears, but today is the 30 days. It's the 1 month anniversary of having to euthanize my 14-year companion of my dog. Okay, but I had 2 marriages. He was with me longer than either of those marriages. My father died when I was 8. He was the longest relationship that I had. And I've been writing poetry to him and about him, but the prompt that you gave us, I started writing to him about, and it didn't come out as a poem. It just came out, but writing to him about leaving his body at the urgent animal center. And it's been 30 days and I've been writing about it, and I thought that I had moved through the stages of grief, but I'm right back there. And there's a lot still to be processed. And it's still very, very fresh. And I remembered something that it brought up a regret that I had. And I'm going to show you his picture. This is, oops, can you see it? This is my boy. This is Jasper. So thank you for the opportunity to remember. And I wanted to tell you that I was the social worker that was at the vet hospital, is the one who told me about this class. So thank you.
Thank you, Saoirse, and thank you for sharing about that. And also, thank you for sharing that there's these moments when we think, oh, surely this is done, and then it isn't. That there are these layers and these waves and that grief has its own timeline. Yeah, thank you for that. Let's see. I see we have Amrita and Elaine and Louise, and unfortunately, friends, I think we're going to have to move forward. But please, if you would write in the chat bar, if you would, or we'll have some time, I think, at the end for us to share also. So we're going to take a look at another poem now, Talking to Grief by Denise Levertov. And again, we'll need two people to read. So if you would go ahead and use your reactions to raise your hand to be a reader. And we have Elizabeth and Mary. Thank you, both of you. And once again, the first time, go ahead and read it, I think almost selfishly, like, what is here for me? And the second time, go ahead and close your eyes and with no effort at all, let the poem land on you. Okay, Elizabeth and then Mary. Thank you, friends.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Talking to grief. Ah, grief, I should not treat you like a homeless dog who comes to the back door for a crust, for a meatless bone. I should trust you. I should coax you into the house and give you your own corner, a worn mat to lie on, your own water dish. You think I don't know you've been living under my porch? You think I don't know you've been living under my porch. You long for your real place to be readied before winter comes. You need your name, your collar and tag. You need the right to warn off intruders, to consider my house your own, and me your person, and yourself my own dog.
Talking to grief. Ah, grief, I should not treat you like a homeless dog who comes to the back door for a crust, for a meatless bone. I should trust you. I should coax you into the house and give you your own corner, a worn mat to lie on, your own water dish. You think I don't know you've been living under my porch. You long for your real place to be readied before winter comes. You need your name, your color, and tag. You need the right to warn off intruders, to consider my house your own, and me your person, and yourself my own dog.
Thank you. Thanks, both of you. So good to hear a poem in two voices. If you would, again, please put the poem into the chat bar so that we're able to read it again and notice what stood out. Thank you so much. What do you notice about this poem? Very different, of course, the poem that we read earlier, James's poem, is really exploring the relationship to the beloved. And this one, very much about our relationship to grief itself. What a profound relationship, so much to teach us. What do you notice, friends, about what shows up for you in this poem? Maria. Oh, or is it Marla? I'm sorry, I can't tell.
Oh, it's Maria. Thank you. No, it's powerful. I mean, it's something that I'd have to really kind of read over and over to digest, but the metaphor is beautiful. Also, like others, I grieve so many things from Mother Earth, and I've had many. My husband and I didn't have any human children. We had many, many animals over the years, watched many go, but I do grieve for my husband, who, like yourself, Rosemerry, I lost him to suicide over 5 years ago. And it's very deep, very visceral, but there's also a lot of joy, a lot of different emotions, knowing that grief's here forever, but it's now part of my life. And and someone touched, I'll just say briefly, on the 5 stages. That's not always true, because we don't just go through stages and all of a sudden everything's fine, because it just doesn't work that way. But I say this from my heart, not to be judgmental or criticized, because I also go and I just put it, if you don't mind, a shout out to a wonderful support group here. They're out of Sacramento, California, but they're Friends for Survival. They've been around for 40 years. Back when the woman who started it, Marilyn Koenig, in the early 70s, lost a son, and people didn't even speak about it. And now we're still trying to bring it out of the darkness, out of the stigma of everything that goes along with it. It's very powerful. And for those of you who may have lost a loved one to suicide, it's a wonderful group. It's been a life changer, game changer for me. And I very much would welcome anybody that wants to check it out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thanks for bringing that up. Also, I'd love to say that Evermore has so many resources like this on their website. So people who are looking for resources for meeting grief and support groups can find a lot of them there too. And yes, this metaphor in this poem, I think, is so powerful in terms of how are we showing up to meet grief today. Rosemerry and then Judy. Also, I just want to honor friends. My goodness, what a beautiful job you're doing of creating space for everyone to talk. And I really appreciate that. Thank you. Rosemerry.
Well, I love the idea of inviting grief into my home. I just love it makes me warm all over, because I know that until we are able to make friends with our grief, until we invite her in to sit down and have a cup of coffee with us, have a drink out of that water bowl, we're not going to get very far. And I know many people, who, when I start talking about this, they're like, oh my God, you don't know what you're talking about. That's a ridiculous concept. But I firmly believe that we need to make grief a sister that we link arms with. And whether you want to look at grief as this little puppy that's gnawing at the porch door, or just inviting this, I tend to put a face on grief. If I could draw, I can't, but if I could draw, I could draw you a picture of what grief looks like to me. And she would be this very average looking woman that is everybody's friend. And she comes in and she drinks coffee with me, and she comforts me, and I comfort her back. And we just have a great relationship. So really what this poem did for me was kind of validate a lot of the feelings that I've had about grief, and a lot of the images that I have about grief. I have not looked at grief as a dog, but I could. I mean, this might change my whole perspective on it. But I just love the whole idea of inviting grief in, giving her a bowl of water or a cup of coffee, and having a chat every morning. You're welcome here.
Beautiful. I love this phrase. And by the way, this would be fun to do. It's not one of the invitations for writing that we'll have for you, but I love this idea. If I could draw grief, she would look like this, he would look like this, it would look like this, and not being able to draw, but you can write it. If I could draw grief, I would show you this. Beautiful. Thank you, Rosemerry. Judy, and then Diana.
Hi, thank you for this. I think what struck me about this poem, it's interesting because I wrote a letter in the last exercise, a letter to my cat my cat of 23 years that died a few years ago. But what struck me about this poem was how we look at dogs as the loyal companion. So loyalty popped out for me when I saw this dog metaphor here, and realizing that I may not be loyal to my grieving, but grief is loyal to me. And that really impacted me, just the way that that turned over like that. So I wanted to share that.
Wow, what a beautiful turnaround. I may not be loyal to my grief, but the grief is loyal to me. Yeah, that's profound. Thank you so much, Judy. And Diana. Oh, you're on mute, friend. There.
Thank you. I think that this metaphor is brilliant. You know, using a homeless dog that can be befriended, and dogs in so many of our lives are these dear, dear companions. So, you know, the idea that the dog has been under the porch, and, you know, that the narrator knows that, but hasn't been ready to let the dog in, and has this turnaround. It's just so beautiful when the opening of the heart, you know, is just happens and allows that that welcoming and embracing.
That's such a beautiful observation, Diana, about the transition, that this is really about that transition from, I know you're there, I don't want to let you in, okay, maybe I'll let you in. And just noticing that shift, that moment where it seems like it's a possibility to let it in. Thank you so much for that. There's something else you said that I really wanted to comment on, and now, oh yeah, just noticing then too that just like we did earlier, that writing prompt together, today grief is, noticing how this poem is basically an extension of that, right? Today grief is, you know, a homeless dog. And just noticing how different it could be, though, you know, yesterday, tomorrow, 5 minutes from now. But in this moment, there's this awareness of this is what it's like. Yeah, thank you so much, Diana. Lainey, and then we'll go into doing some writing of our own.
So the most powerful phrase for me was, you need the right to warn off intruders. And I have shied away from uncomfortable feelings my whole life. I will carry this line with me every time anger, anxiety, fear, all those come up, and remind myself, you have the right to warn off intruders. Grief needs not to have any diversions or distractions, or it was just such a powerful line for me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's so hard to to give ourselves that space, right? To really, really just show up and meet the grief without even inviting intruders, right? Any distraction to not feel it, right? Beautifully said, Lainey. Thank you so much. By the way, I noticed that there's some really beautiful comments in the chat bar, so I invite you to look in that and see what some people are saying about it. If you would, please, Jenna, go ahead and put up our invitations for doing some writing. And again, it doesn't matter if you use these or not, just know these are ideas, but whatever is most alive in you, that's the thing to do. And I see Keisha's already, thank you, put the poem in the chat bar so that it's right there for you if you need it. So here are a couple of ideas. Have a conversation with grief. Perhaps over coffee, like we were saying earlier. Have a conversation with grief. What would you say to it? And would it speak back? Or imagine grief in this moment is an animal. Knowing that in 5 minutes it might be a very different animal. How do you treat this animal? How does it treat you? And what does it have to teach you? Although I didn't write this prompt in here, you already know this. Today, grief is a rattlesnake. Today, grief is a jellyfish. Today, grief is a honey badger. Today, grief is a soft Persian cat. Today, grief is, just notice that you could choose any animal. You don't need to know. If you just choose whatever animal comes up for you first, not knowing where it's going to take you, follow it and see what it has to say. So we'll come back together again in 15 minutes. So at 30 after the hour, know that whatever you do, you can only do it right. You can only do it right. We'll see you in 15 minutes at 30 after. And 2 more minutes. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back. So at this point, it's like the novels where you get to choose your own adventure. We're going to have 2 options. One is that you can go into small groups right now. And in a small group, this is what would happen if you choose this option. There'll be 3 people, probably-ish, in a group, and each person will have 5 minutes and to share, and each person will have 10 minutes to listen. And each person will have 15 minutes to really companion and be companioned by others who are meeting grief. And I have some very specific guidelines for you as you go into small groups, if that's what you choose to do. In the small groups, if it's your turn to share, you have a couple of options. With the 5 minutes while you're speaking, you can share one of the things that you wrote. You could share just one line or a few lines from what you wrote, whatever it is that feels safe, maybe not all of it, but just a part of it. You could share nothing that you wrote, but talk just about your process. What was it like for you? Or you can say, I am just here to listen. All of these are perfectly appropriate. Any one of these options is a wonderful one if you are the person who's speaking. And if you're one of the people who is listening, then I have a very specific list of questions for you. There will be small groups. There will be small groups, and then there'll be another option also. So you'll get to choose what you're going to do. If you would please go ahead, Jenna, and put up some of the sample questions for listeners. So what we will not do is offer feedback. We're certainly not going to critique, and we're not going to talk about our own opinions. We're really going to keep it focused on the person who is sharing to help them explore what is happening for them, what has shown up for them with this writing and this process. Excuse me. And so to that end, here are a few ideas for questions you could ask. What surprised you about the writing? Were you ever stuck? What did you do then? What part of this process feels most true for you? What part of this writing feels most true for you? What part was the most difficult to write? Where else do you think this wants to go? What did you notice about your own writing as you read it out loud, which can be very different, the sharing and the writing? What questions do you have about your own writing or your own process? Or you could choose one line from something they said, repeat it back to them and say, tell me about that. And I see that Keisha's also put it in the chat bar, so it's going to be there for you if you don't choose to do this. And then if you go ahead and take those questions down from the screen share, thank you. Oh my gosh, you guys are amazing. Thanks for all the help tonight. The other idea I have is if you did not, if for any reason feel it being in a small group feels uncomfortable for you, you can choose to stay in the big group. And if you do that, then we'll talk about process and or you can just put it all on mute and continue to write until we come back together. But we'll spend 15 minutes. If you're in the small group, then you're going to hear Jenna come in after 5 minutes and say, it's time to change. And at that point, make sure that you do turn it over so everyone has an opportunity to share evenly. If you find yourself in a room by yourself for a moment, don't worry. Keisha's going to be making sure that anybody who chose to stay in this in the big group stays here, and everybody else gets paired up with at least one other person, maybe two, in the small groups. All right. So before we go into the small groups, please do repeat these words after me, something I've modified from the Animas Institute, Bill Plotkin, and no one else will hear you, but please do just say out loud in the sanctity of your own home, repeat these words. Are you willing to listen? With the ears of your heart to the other voices of yourself speaking. And thank you for that promise to yourself and to each other, and with great respect and tenderness for each other, I invite you to either go into small groups now or to stay in the main room. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the spotlight so that whoever is still here in the main room, we have a chance then to talk about process, about what happened for you, either in the first writing or second writing, or in general, when you notice that you're writing, if you would like to share about what happens for you or what happened tonight. What do you notice about writing and meeting grief? Anna, I think I can actually, I'm not sure I can see well. Anna, I did happen to see you raise your hand. But to make sure I see you raise your hand, you might need to use the reactions button at the bottom just to make sure. But Anna, go ahead and unmute.
Thank you so much for this offering. For me, I just found this particular exercise quite helpful for processing a complex grief, which when choosing what was a spider, I was able to speak to the person who I didn't like very much. And it became a lot easier to understand a little bit more anyway, what went on, and to release some anger, but to also feel love and generosity for the others who were going through the same thing. So I found it really helped my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. thank you for speaking about how really complex it can be. How it can be, the grief isn't just for people who, well, that all of our relationships can be quite complex, and that there can be a sense of frustration or anger or dislike, as you say, for people, and that the grief is no less profound for that. I really appreciate you bringing that in. And choosing the spider, or letting the spider choose you, and seeing what was there. Yeah, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. And I'm just going to point out too that if I have to interrupt you at a moment, just we're going to have to stop talking when Jenna needs to go in to the breakout rooms and give an announcement. So if at that moment I stop you so that there's time, forgive me for needing to pause, but that's a housekeeping responsibility we'll need to have. Suzanne. Are you speaking, Suzanne? I can't hear you. Oops, no. Yep, I see you're not on mute, but I still don't hear you. Suzanne, my bright idea is perhaps put your comment or question in the chat bar. Let's see. And Judy, I see that you've written here. Could you put the promise we just spoke to ourselves in the chat? I'd like to write it down. Yes, the promise was, are you willing to listen with the ears of your heart to the other voices of yourself speaking? Are you willing to listen with the ears of your heart to the other voices of yourself speaking? And that's adapted from Bill Plotkin at the Animas Institute. So those aren't my own words, but they're not his either. The ears of your heart, that comes from Saint Benedict, as in the Benedictine monks. Oh, thank you, Keisha, for putting it in there. Thank you so much. If anyone else has a question, or if anyone else would like to share what they wrote in this group. And Debbie.
Can you hear me? Thank you. Rosemary, may I ask you a favor? Would you possibly just do a couple of bars of the that you were doing, just 5 seconds even?
Sure.
Thank you. My body still remembers. My Madeline. My Mary, Mary Madeline. Ah, her aroma. The miracle who made me a mama, made me marvel, made me mourn. My Madeline, a memory. That's it.
My Madeline who made me a mama. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for letting me.
And thank you, Ever. I don't know if you can see the hearts that are popping up all over the screen. And friends who are here, thank you for listening. And I feel like saying thank you is a beautiful way to honor I've heard you, and also doing the hearts, or if you want to hold hold your heart, or prayer hands, or hold up your hands, or any way that says, I hear you. What a beautiful way to let each other know we've been heard. Elizabeth, I see your hand is up.
Well, I was so grateful for the prompt about grief as an animal, because it's so far from the way I think of it. And this dolphin came to my mind, and I need to work the words better, but the image is I'm in this little boat, and this dolphin is swimming around and jumping up to get my attention, but is also swimming close beside so that I can ride astride her. And it just it just made me so happy to feel the connection with this beautiful being beside me.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I could see the joy in the way you just spoke, just in the way you moved your body. It made me so happy, you said. And isn't that astonishing, the paradox? It made me so happy to experience grief this way, right? Yet it was undeniable to watch you just now and believe that it was 1000% true. Thank you so much for sharing that. Grief is a dolphin moving beside us, sleeping. Thank you. Anyone else with a question or comment about process, or wanting to share something? Oh gosh, we didn't go in and, did you go in and change people, dear Jenna? Is Jenna here?
Yes, yes, I did.
Okay, good. Okay, and it looks like that's going to happen again in about 20 seconds. So friends, if you would just hang out for 20 seconds, and then we'll let Jenna go in and give an announcement, and then we'll jump in.
Oh, Rosemary, I already did it. Like, so we're fine. Yeah, we're on.
Okay.
We're
All
on.
right.
We have about 3 minutes, 10 seconds for the next round. Okay, honey?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'm going to just note that Suzanne Gonzalez put in the chat bar, thank you, that she wanted to thank the previous speaker who had felt isolated by discussions of grief that assumes sadness as opposed to anger, and preceded by months of abuse. So I really appreciate you, Suzanne, for bringing that in, and to our other speaker who did also. Thank you. And Judith.
Hi, thank you. I'm not a writer, but I do occasionally write little bits of poetry. My mother used to do the same, but I have no training or anything. I very seldom do it. So it was really interesting to get the prompts. That really opened stuff up for me. I mean, it gave me a lot of ideas. The prompt for remembering, my body remembers. My 23-year-old son died at the end of 2021. And that just brought out this sweet memory of him lying on my lap and his little chubby feet at 4 months old pressing into my belly, and how he was giggling, and how that's still so real. But I don't know where he is. And then the second prompt, about the animal, and then that the animal might change, and that just brought up for me this feeling of how the grief can be kind of in the background, and I can have kind of a calmish sort of a day or days, and then it will swell up again, and it's like an animal creeping around on the perimeter of my heart and my mind, like a panther, and then it will come up at me, and I'll give into it, and it becomes like a small black kitten that needs to be tended so carefully and treasured and kept safe and nurtured. So it was interesting how just those simple prompts opened my mind up to what could that be. It was really interesting. So I thank you for that.
The panther prowling on the perimeter, and then that soft little tiny black kitten. such very different energies and both so
Yeah.
totally true.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that. And Debbie again, nice to see you.
Thank you. I want to comment on the prompt. I did read my obviously my composition, but I loved that prompt. My body remembers, of course, I remember Madeline smelling her hair and kissing her, and it's just such a physical. I remember saying so obviously there were a lot of in my poem. That's one of the first sounds that babies make, and I remember hugging her. That's something that we always do. So it just that came to me, even though as a teacher I'm thinking, oh, that sounds a bit like an acrostic poem, but it really it just brought up all that good feelings. So I really, really responded to that one right away. The animal one I had a harder time with, actually, only because the only thing that could come up in my mind was my precious. It's my grief, I've become very possessive is maybe I don't know if that's quite the word, but it's very special to me now, and I have to sit with my grief. It's something I have to visit all the time. So call it an animal, call it something else, but I need to go there and sit with that. That's I don't consider it an enemy anymore. I don't need to. In fact, I never did. As soon as the grief hit, I just needed to, I guess, hug it. Here I'm doing it with my arms, but really that's it. I needed to keep it close and not make it go away. That was the only way I could deal with it. And so I found those prompts very interesting in that particularly the first one, immediately, body, well, I can go on. So thank you
Yeah, for and what a that. good point. My grief, it is ours.
Friends,
It's ours
F5
in a
up.
way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenna. Lainey, let's see how far we get, but people are coming out of their groups any moment.
So I really got connected to the element of surprise in the process of writing. I knew I wanted to respond to the prompt of writing to a loved one. And at first I didn't know who. And then I thought about my mother and then my father. And they both had full lives. But the surprise and shock was the one event I picked for each of their lives. And I found part of me wanting to fight. No, don't. It can't be that one. You got so, but I really welcome the surprise, and I'm so much more attached to the surprise in the process of writing.
Yeah, no, not that one. I understand. We have somebody earlier said I had my agenda, and sometimes our agenda is no, not that. I just want to say that sometimes it's okay. No, not that is okay to say no. If what comes up and you think for whatever reason I'm not ready, that's okay. Of course it is. And to notice that this time you wrote about that one memory, and maybe next time another, and next time another, that there can be so many poems then that touch it. And this time it was what you said no to at first that you let come through. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Lainey. And Nancy, I see you have your hand up, and we will have time now, but I'm going to welcome everyone back, and then we'll have time for you to share. So welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much. And I'm grateful to have everyone back in this circle after going away, or perhaps staying in this smaller circle. And we have 8 minutes now for us to circle back together. If there's something that's showing up for you now about what our experience has been together, if you have a question for me about writing about grief, and then just at the very end, we'll have a way to come together completely. So, Nancy.
Oh, I came today thinking I just wanted to write, and I could have picked so many instances of grief that seem to be compounding now at this age of my life. And been listening to many of these lovely poems and observations and just thinking about how it seems to me now in looking at my own life and the lives of people around me, and maybe all of us on some level, that we live in grief a lot, not necessarily for single people we have lost or outlived, people who have gone before us, but we grieve the mistakes we've made and the country which is broken. I know I grieve for so many things that have not gone well over the past 5 years. And I just feel like the process of grieving is almost an everyday practice. If you're going to breathe, you're going to get up in the morning, you're going to have some social interaction, and you're going to have hopefully some reflective time. That grief is just, it's going to be there too with the joy and hopefully, a way to make peace or do our work wherever we can feel we have impact. But just seems like grief is so non-personal these days, and personal.
How it is both non-personal and personal, and something that we meet in such complex ways, in so many ways. Very, very beautifully said. Which I do think then that having some kind of a writing practice, even if it is in the morning, to sit down and write today grief is, right? In this way, we get to see how it shows up again and again in these new ways, the multiple layers of it. I'm going to invite you all, we have a few more moments, hold on, Charlotte, I'm just going to invite you to think about, is there something you're taking away from our time together tonight? And maybe write it down for yourself. Is it something someone said? Is there something that you wrote, an experience that you had, a line from a poem, maybe your own or maybe someone else's? And go ahead and maybe write that down for yourself. What are you taking away? My friend Augusta calls these pearls. So just notice if you have a pearl. Write it down. You can also add it to the chat bar if you wish, but this is they're even more beautiful when we share them, but it's also really just for you. Charlotte.
Rosemary, I wrote as part of a writing group for several years, and I had a daily practice 5 days a week, and it was geared very differently because there wasn't really time to share one-on-one in the group. It had wonderful strengths and it got me writing. I have had no desire to write on my own at all. And I feel like the whole secret for me right now is being accompanied. And so I wanted to ask if you had a simple takeaway around that, around creating a simple process, like to carry this forward in different ways to continue, because I found it so useful. It really uncovered some treasures that we're not getting the attention because of the presence that's here, right?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Charlotte. And I think you're so right that there is something wondrous and magical that happens when we write together, when we come together and share this process. It's not like writing alone at all, is it? So how to carry it forward? I mean, we will be doing it again, but we're only doing it, every 3 months. My first thought is to, and what has worked for me is to find a very small group of people, and by small I mean 3, 3 people who are willing to commit to each other to a writing practice and say, I will read what you write, and perhaps if it's a response, but 3, because if, as my friend Jude says, if there's 2, then one person will flake and it'll be over. But if there's 3, then 2 of you will usually keep it going for a while. Uh, and to come up then with some very basic ideas about this is how we might meet, but just a very small, find two people who are willing to meet with you, and yeah.
And I have two people, and now I have permission. Do I to use these prompts?
Oh my goodness, of course.
Okay.
Absolutely. Anything that's mine is yours. I also have on my YouTube channel, which is Rosemerry T, Rosemerry, Rosemerry T. I have a program called Grief and Grace, which is just me offering lots of prompts for writing. It's about 50 minutes long, and there's maybe 12, I don't know how many, maybe around 12 poems that I read and discuss, and that's free. It's right there. So
thank you so much.
That. And Allison, I think this is all we'll have time for before we're going to close. I'm sorry, Luce, but if you would like to put yours in the chat bar, I'd love that.
I just want to say thank you so much. This felt like a really serendipitous evening for me. A friend of mine sent me your poem on watching my friend pretend her heart is not breaking, because I lost my son to suicide 3 years ago. He was 17. And I then researched you because I belong to a poetry group. We read other people's poems on Fridays, and I read that poem and I wanted to just say it a little something, and I realized, wow, your son had also passed, and it was very similar timing. And then tonight happens to be my birthday, and I thought, what better way to do something for myself about writing into grief. I've been wanting to write. I meditate daily, and this was just, I wrote 2 poems tonight. I've never written a poem. I don't even know how I wrote them. I read them back. I don't hardly remember writing them. It literally poured out like a channel. And my breakout partner and I were just, it just felt, this was amazing. This was really what I needed. I need to write more. I love writing. And I'm just so happy to be here. So thank you for sharing this.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison, for sharing that. Thank you. Sweet friends, it's time for us to come to a close tonight. And so I'm going to invite you to recite the end of this, just to recite this small little part of this poem, Snow Geese, with me from Mary Oliver. And of course, you're going to be in the silence of your own room, but we'll be saying it together. So if you would just repeat these words after me. Oh, to love what is lovely and does not last. What a task to ask of anything or anyone. Yet it is ours. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, Evermore. Thank you so much, Jenna. Thank you so much, Keisha. Thanks to Joyelle. Thank you, everyone. If you want to go ahead and unmute, be lovely to hear your voices.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
Thank
you.
Thank
you, everyone. Thank you,
Rosemary.
Rosemary.
Good night.
Such a blessing.
Thank you all.
Thank
This was
y'all.
beautiful.
And
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank
So
you.
much.
Beautiful. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much.
much.
Rosemary.
Yes, what a gift.
Rosemary,
Yes.
thank you.
What a gift.
Rosemary, you're in my kitchen every day.
So grateful.
Amen.
Thank
Gratitude.
you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good
night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Blessing.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Rosemary, can I still ask you my question?
Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for I was also introduced to your poem through the pretending my friend's heart isn't breaking. And my friend sent that to me shortly after my daughter died.
lost his stillbirth, and this was last year, and I immediately just like poured through and gobbled up your poems and saw you were a bereaved mother too. And I think one of the things that surprised me, and I'm here with my husband too, is also a creative. I'm an artist, he's a musician. And I think one of the things that has been really hard for us is figuring out how to show up while the grief is settling. And I was surprised at how quickly and freely you were able to share your words with us after Finn died. And I was curious about your experience in being able to show up in that way. I can imagine that it was difficult. And you know, it's the transition from the chaos of the moment into becoming in real life again is a tender one. And I was curious about how your art and practice showed up for you and how you arrived in that particular moment.
Thank you. And Luce and your husband, I just want to honor that loss. I hear you. And it's so different for all of us, right? So to know that however you feel is how you feel, and if it's impossible right now, then it's impossible, and it will be until it isn't. Right? I mean, that's my first thought. But I'll say this, that I do think that part of what happened for me was that I had already at that point for over 15 years been sharing poems every day. I'd been writing them and sharing them every day for at that point over 15 years. So it was it was a habit, right? And there were certain habits that came, you know, like I kept brushing my teeth, you know. I didn't write a poem for 7 weeks, but there were habits that stayed. And I felt like I couldn't until I could. In the beginning, there was no way, and then there was no way not to. So I just followed what was right in that moment. I couldn't have done it any differently than I did. I couldn't have done it sooner. I think I would have been in even more pain if I'd done it later. So I can't tell you why that was the right timing for me. I just know that that was, and when it was right, it was right. There was no way to stop it. But it wouldn't have been right a second before it was.
You can't see it, but we're both nodding aggressively over.
Yeah. Thank you for your question, Liz. Thank you for staying to ask, and thank you, Jenna and Keisha, for staying too, to allow for that.
And I'm sure you have some debrief time to come in. Thank you for letting me crash that, but I'm a massive fangirl, and you have tended to my soul from afar. So thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys for being here.
And thank you, Evermore. You guys are, I'm so grateful that you're here.
Thank you. We're so grateful you're here too.
Good night.
All right, sweet friends. Good night.